Hello, everyone. Welcome back into MLS Digest. I'm Camille, your host, and we're here to preview Week 16 action of MLS, and it's yet again another midweek slate here with 13 games, 4 teams on byes: the Chicago Fire, LAFC, Kansas City, and St. Louis, ahead of the weekend's action with LAFC having to play that play-in game for the Club World Cup against Club America, so they have that bye midweek, and then also with the Whitecaps later down this week, playing in, of course, the Champions Cup final at Cruz Azul. But they still have a game this midweek, and just plenty of congestion in a lot of these teams' schedules. The busiest month by far of the season May has been, and this will kind of be towards the end of that with the Club World Cup approaching and some international duties for a lot of players and other kind of minor gaps in competition, and the schedule is going to get a little bit more broken up for sure in these summer months. So a lot to preview here ahead of this midweek slate with plenty of teams on quick turnarounds. So let's not waste any time and get into everything you need to know with lineups, predictions, and everything else to expect for the midweek slate. To start everything off, it's Atlanta hosting Orlando City, and that's just what sports, soccer in general, and of course MLS is all about. It's not played on paper, and Atlanta somehow, some way gets its third win of the season only through the first 15 games against Cincinnati of all teams, which was second best in the East entering last weekend's matchup. And it all fell apart for Cincinnati after that Haglund injury, after a very controversial, blow dealt from Latte Loth that I don't know if it's been further reviewed or not at this point, if he's going to get any type of disciplinary action. But Haglund got injured, and then Hadebe came in, and they had to kind of swap roles in terms of which side of the field the center backs were playing on. And then literally Atlanta scored 2 goals in the next 5 or so minutes from there. And so just kind of a game you chalk up to, maybe Atlanta was due a little bit, and all 4 goal scorers were no one that you would expect. Latte Loth, Almiron, Moranchuk, Saba, none of them scored. And I think 3 of the goals were on set pieces, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, that doesn't make me sold on this Atlanta team. I mean, I talked about it with the Red Bulls several weeks back when they put up, 7 on the Galaxy. And then since then, they've been kind of, once again, just not consistent. So these things happen in MLS, and Atlanta gets to stay home. Meanwhile, Orlando with the 1-0 win against Portland. So both coming off really good stretches. Orlando now 11 games unbeaten, and once again a short turnaround. And the good thing for Orlando is that Atuesta came back in that midfield finally after dealing with some injuries, but Gerbet as well has been kind of playing into that starting role. So you have this depth now that has kind of risen to the top in terms of this competition, in a sense, in this midfield. So that's a good problem to have for Orlando, as they and many other teams, of course, are dealing with this congested schedule. But this is a game I just don't really want to, I think it's hard to predict because of just Atlanta's kind of unpredictability. Orlando, they have been playing very, very well. They seem to be a pretty balanced team, despite maybe some concerns on the defensive side of the ball early on in the season. But Galese has been, he has to be in the lead for clean sheets at this point, because I think he got 5 in a row earlier. And it just seems like Orlando has figured it out defensively as well. But at the same time, an 11-match unbeaten streak, I feel like they might be a little bit due to lose. You could have a bad performance at any time, like Cincinnati just did. And they have to travel a little bit here. Atlanta gets to stay home. Can they build momentum off that? We haven't seen it yet. They haven't won back-to-back games, obviously. Only just 3 wins on the season. And this is going to be a chalky one. Obviously, rotation is going to play a big factor in a lot of these games, so it's hard to really predict lineups fully, since teams also have, games on the weekend. And I think Orlando should be continuing their unbeaten streak, but it wouldn't surprise me if Atlanta builds off what happened in that last game, and they responded after the coach called them soft, and maybe that'll continue here. But for my prediction, I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. Next up, it's Cincinnati hosting Dallas. And as we just discussed, Cincinnati getting only one of its few losses of the season against Atlanta. And now Nick Hagelin seems to be out for an indefinite amount of time with some sort of a rib or / lung injury after that, moment with Latte Lath that I guess is not, he's not being punished for. And in that game itself, it definitely discombobulated Cincy's chemistry and all that. But regardless, this back line, even without Hagelin, in an actual couple of days of preparation for a game or whatever, is still very strong. But this team just has been getting the results, as Pat Noonan was talking about before the Atlanta game, but they haven't been completely dominant on the ball and in just generally in too many phases of play throughout each game. Like, they haven't been convincing enough and killed off games, I guess you could say. Meanwhile, Dallas has had a rough stretch of results, 3 losses in their last 5, and just went to Seattle, as well as having extra open cup games in the past couple of weeks, in which they were just eliminated on the road to the Red Bulls right before that Seattle game. So they've had a bit of some rough travel, and now they have to come back from the West Coast on a very short break against the Cincinnati side, who has one less day of rest because they play on Sunday. And Acosta will be coming back because he was suspended for that Seattle game. This team is relatively healthy as well. And Attack Musa came back, Anderson Julio. And Cincinnati should be winning this one, but this short rest is going to really be tough to predict in terms of the preparation and the rotation that we could see here. And Dallas, I believe, is the team definitely dealing with the more tired legs in terms of just the general wear and tear travel. And Cincinnati, of course, is the better team, but Dallas has been largely successful on the road this season. Obviously, the last 2 MLS results have been losses, including that thumping by San Diego. But before that, they were like 5 or 6 on the road, unbeaten, and of course winning at Miami. So they can't really be counted out, but at the same time, Cincinnati's home form has been really, really impressive. They haven't really blown teams out too much, but at the same time, in a midweek game like this, I feel like they'll handle business and just get over the line just with the quality. Kubo as well, still dealing with an injury. So maybe Sergio Santos starts this one since he didn't on Sunday. But once again, I think Cincinnati bounces back. They're not a team that's going to be, going on too many terrible stretches like back-to-back or 3 losses in a row type of teams. And this is just a situation where even though they're on short rest, Dallas is probably worse for wear. And so I'm going to go Cincinnati to win this one 2-0. Moving on, it's an Eastern Conference matchup with DC United hosting the Revs. 13th versus 10th in the East. DC United winless in its last 4. New England 3 draws in a row now, but a lot of road games in this span, and it has to be taking its toll, as well as obviously the couple of Open Cup games they played. DC did as well, but DC has advanced to the quarterfinals. New England was knocked out by the Fire in the round of 16. And for DC, it's just kind of lacking, right? Benteke has been re-injured once again for a couple of games. He kind of miraculously came back against Colorado, I believe it was, after picking up his first kind of minor injury, and then he re-injured that ankle. And his status is probably just purely questionable here because they haven't really been too transparent about him in general. And for New England, Campagna still dealing with an injury. I'm pretty sure he's expected out for this one. And then Langoni, I don't know how close he's to coming back. His timeline was 2 to 4 weeks. It's already been around like 2.5 maybe, and that would be a big boost for them. But he's also been kind of played in this wingback role in a sense, in this adjusted formation for New England, which has obviously found a lot of success. But once again, New England, the team with heavy travel recently. DC gets to stay home after losing the Red Bulls, but they've also haven't scored in 4 straight games since winning against Colorado. So that's a major sign for concern. Obviously, without Benteke, it's going to take someone to step up. But this team just seems, once again, truly like a wooden spoon contender, or just one of those bottom teams in the East for sure, because the quality is really lacking. And it's probably going to take something from Carles Hill, some type of brilliance to separate these two sides. And the weather is going to be predicted to be very, very rainy, very ugly. And actually, I forgot to mention, but I will be actually at this game since I'm currently in the Virginia area and will be making it out to this game. So first time at Audi Field, probably going to be an ugly match, but I think New England pulls this one out, just adds to DC's woes. But at the same time, the wear and tear for New England, I don't think they'll be as defensively sound. This might be a sneaky 2-1 victory, I'm going to call, for the Revs. Moving on, it's another Eastern matchup. Miami hosts Montreal. Miami dropping down to 7th now despite coming back very late against the Union for an impressive draw on the road against obviously the East's best team at the moment. But a lot of tired legs for sure for this Miami side. Some travel mixed in recently. Obviously, this group the stars are old. Montreal as well, still just the one win on the season. Choked a 2-0 lead at home after 2 early goals against LAFC, but LAFC came back. And they have to go all the way down to Miami here on a short rest, of course. Meanwhile, Miami has a kind of in a look-ahead spot because they play the Crew on the weekend. And that's going to be obviously one of, if not the match of the weekend in just purely MLS play, because obviously we have the Champions Cup final and LAFC's clash with Club America. But for Montreal, I mean, Vrioni and Owusu have been kind of picking it up for sure. They both scored in the last game in this 2-striker system. Caden Clark came back, played some minutes. But as for the rest of that attacking midfield, Herber's now injured. Duke has been injured. They also played midweek in the Canadian Championship. And I believe they won here last year, Montreal, against all expectations, or at least got a draw, if memory serves me right. But Miami should be handling business. They've been in such a just bad stretch of form in the entire month of May, ever since basically they started that semifinal against Vancouver in the Champions Cup. And there might be rotation here for sure because of the travel for both teams coming back, with Miami coming back. But I think the price for this in terms of the betting odds is obviously spot on. Miami's probably going to give up a goal on some chalky stuff, but it's really hard. I think they end this winless run here in a midweek fashion. I think they should have enough quality to take it to Montreal. But at the same time, if Montreal's press can kind of overcome these tired legs in the short rest, because that has been kind of their saving grace in a lot of their draws this year, then that will certainly make things difficult for Miami. But I'm going to go with a 3-1 Miami victory in this one. Next up, it's a cross-conference matchup between NYCFC and the Dynamo. And for our first best bet here, I'm going with NYC to win this match on the money line, -105. I think it's a great price for this midweek match. NYCFC has really been on fire this season at home, as is the case usually, with 6 wins, 0 draws, and 2 losses at home, whether that be Yankee Stadium, Citi Field, wherever. And this one's going to be at Yankee Stadium once again, just like it was last week out, or on the weekend against the Fire. And the NYCFC is actually top 8 in both XG and XGA. Meanwhile, the Dynamo, as we know, dead last in terms of the analytics with XG. And here they'll also be missing Ezekiel Ponce, the number 9. And I think that's a really big deal for this Dynamo side that has obviously been a little bit better at creating chances. I think the numbers in terms of the XG is a little bit skewed, I will say, just because since Linger came, that attack has definitely been a little bit more consistent. It's offered the midfield chances to get a little bit higher up and get into scoring positions. We've seen Jack McGlynn score goal after goal almost and be one of their top scorers. But without that target man and without any other winger besides Linger, I think it's going to be very difficult for this Dynamo team on very short rest and after a really congested road schedule in which they've also had 2 extra Open Cup games that they've played compared to NYCFC just playing the 1. So 1 extra actually. But most recently, and also just going on this road trip now where they just came off that West Coast game, choked to a 2-0 lead to San Jose. And NYCFC, though they did play on Sunday, so they have that one less day of rest, I still think this NYCFC team at home has just been really dominant. They haven't drawn yet, as I mentioned in that record, and it's really gone one way or the other, and they've really been able to pile that pressure on at home where they obviously have this unique advantage. So I think this Dynamo team has done a great job recently of pulling out results and leaving it late when it's come to turning these 0-0 results deep into games into wins and kind of coming out on top in that sense. But I think this is just going to be too much for them to handle. And for the price, despite this being on a short turnaround, I think there's going to be far more rotation for the Dynamo, and with Ponce missing, with NYCFC probably not doing as much rotation. And they've just been in such great form, winning that derby, winning against the Fire. They're just a completely different team, and that's really usually always been the case for this team, and why they've been able to stick around sort of the middle to the bottom of the Eastern Conference and at least sneak into the playoffs. So I like this price, and I've been fading the Dynamo a lot this year and kind of gotten hurt on it, honestly. But here I think this is a fantastic spot. This team has just been on such a deep road trip that I think it's really going to finally hurt them here, and this unbeaten kind of little streak for them stops in MLS play. The Red Bulls host Charlotte, 9th versus 8th in the East, and Charlotte has really fallen off a cliff here with 4 losses previously in a row, with a lot of those being road games, and then it was added onto that when they came back home against the Fire, but they did just beat the Crew 3-2, so a pretty nice statement win at home, where they, of course, are one of the most dominant teams, so good to see them return to that form in a sense. And for the Red Bulls, winning against the rivals DC after losing to rivals NYCFC previously. But since that 7-0 win against the Galaxy, like we discussed, I mean, this is just an average team, guys. This is whether Forsberg or Choupo-Moting want to show up on any given day. And, it's just so inconsistent. I hate having to say this every week, every match day, but there's nothing really to talk about with this team further. Sofo, of course, has been a bright spot, the young kid. They do have a couple of young players, obviously, and a lot of academy players that are now first team starters in that midfield. But the defense has really kind of fallen off, I feel like, and hasn't been as, consistent. And it just feels like, once again, Sandro Schwarz is going to be praying for another run in these playoffs as a low seed. And while this team could be built to do that because the playoffs are a different game, and we did see that last season, it's just really tough to rely on making deep runs when you're not going to be hosting home games. It's just not ideal. It's not probable, and this is where they find themselves already basically almost halfway through the season. And this is one that's going to be probably a more dull match. It's hard to, know what rotation is going to come of this, because Charlotte has a lot of depth pieces, or not a lot, but a decent amount of depth pieces injured in basically every position at the moment. Tim Ream's dealing with something. He's not a depth piece, but still have to mention that. And obviously this team has been playing a lot of games recently. Red Bulls as well. At least they advanced to the Open Cup quarterfinals. But this is one I just don't want to, from a betting perspective, of course, I would never touch. I mean, I think this is going to be a dull game with not many chances. Charlotte, of course, is abysmal on the road. And the Red Bulls really don't convince you in terms of their phases of play, and it's just really about who takes their chances. But how strong will these lineups be? We don't know, and that's the problem here. So it's hard to make a prediction on this one, but I'm gonna go for a boring 1-1 draw. Moving on, it's a pretty good matchup between two of the East best at the moment, with Nashville now being ahead of Columbus in the standings due to far better form recently So it's the Crew hosting Nashville. The Crew are winless in their last 4, 3 draws in that time, and then lost on the road at Charlotte, who obviously before that match was on a terrible run of form. Nashville, though, has really been taking care of business with at least just not losing in their last 5, 3 wins in that span. Not really too many, blowouts or anything like that, but they're getting the job done and they're playing winning soccer at the moment. And this sets up to be a good match. I feel like these teams have had really good matchups with high scoring, affairs in the past couple of seasons. And I think this could be trending toward another one of those. I know it's a congested schedule, so just in general, as we've been seeing, not many games have been shootouts. I feel like just across the league. I mean, sure, you've gotten we had 3 or 4 3-3 draws on the weekend, but besides that, it just hasn't been so widespread. But I think in this one, despite maybe the tired legs, I don't think we're going to see too much rotation because just from the Crew's perspective, they don't really have too much depth to rotate between. And then for Nashville, I think they've been dealing with it okay enough where even though in Open Cup they've had those games while the Crew haven't been in Open Cup, they've been rotating fine enough, and this should be a good matchup because also for the Crew you have Schulte dealing with an injury, Moreira as well, and Nashville essentially full strength. Zimmerman finally played some minutes for the first time, so that definitely boosts their chances if he can start this game, but I wouldn't be convinced he can run out there as a starter yet. So if that is the case, then once again Nashville's defensive shape is definitely worse without him. And this is one that I want to wait for lineups for because this is one that I might, from a betting perspective, as one of the best bets, kind of taken over on. I think it's sitting at a pretty good price at the moment, both the score and over. I think this could be a really, really good matchup. The Crew have had a lot of issues with finishing, of course, but Nashville, kind of just the pressure they have on the ball, I think this is going to be a really good just matchup as a neutral to watch as well, with how these two teams deal with just playing in possession, enforcing their kind of style of play on the other team. But they're both very dictative and purposeful with their possession. So I think there's going to be a lot of really high octane action in this one and just chances. So, but it's hard to know without fully knowing if the Crew as well are looking ahead to that Miami matchup on the weekend and things of that nature. So this is what I'm waiting on a lineup for, but I think this has shootout vibes to it, and I'm gonna go that I want to take the Crew at home, but it's very, very hard with their form, and once again, it's hard to know without a lineup. I'm gonna go for a 2-2 draw between Columbus and Nashville. Next up, it's Austin hosting RSL, and for the second best bet of this week's episode, I'm going with the under 2.5. It's it's an okay price. It's a pretty fair price. It's not plus odds, of course, which is usually the case in MLS matchups, but obviously the books have adjusted, and it's a midweek, it's a short rest, and that's where I'm going with this. And I mean, Austin just doesn't have shootouts in general. Most of their attacking, success in games where they've actually been destroying teams has come in Open Cup. Out of all things, that's where they've just found their, shooting boots. And RSL on the other side, winless in its last 5. Choked against Vancouver, let in a late goal to not even get away with a point there. And in this one, Goncalves is going to be injured. Austin as well, still dealing with that Danny Pereira injury. And they've also just had so many more games than RSL recently, with the couple of Open Cup games and still advancing. And I just don't... I've been expecting rotation out of Austin for so many games now, and it just seems like Bukhari and Vasquez are just like robots, just like Bouanga is. Bouanga I get, but I feel like it's coming, and as well as just the fact that regardless of who plays, right, Austin doesn't have penetration. and it's just so basic, and the midfield has not been performing up to expectations. It's not creative enough. RSL just as well, even though they have some pretty bad defensive stats on the road here. I just think it's going to be a really non-entertaining game. Austin, of course, is one of the best defensive teams, and they're going to, keep that as their staple. But as we've seen, there haven't been too many games from an Austin perspective that have hit this total, first of all, and when it has, it's usually been from one side. So, unless Austin randomly runs RSL off the pitch here or vice versa, I just don't see this being like a back and forth game. And even though it's not, it's a pretty, the line is, 50-50 essentially. It's not a great line, but still, it's one that just, I feel like you have to take in this spot. It's one of those games that in a midweek on short rest, RSL coming over from, coming down to Texas. Austin has had a couple of road games. Like, I'm not gonna get too cute here. Like, this is gonna be a bad game. And unless Diego Luna scores another worldie ahead of USA camp, which I'm sure he's looking forward to, I'm going to take my chances on this one. It's a good price for me, and shouldn't expect any different in this Austin game. Next up, it's another Western matchup, this time between two teams that have faced each other previously, and San Diego got the better of Seattle, certainly, in the reverse fixture, but it's 5th versus 2nd in the West. San Diego's really climbed up the standings after a bit of a rough end to April, start of May, with I think it was 3 losses in a row, and since then, in their last 5, 4 wins in 5, including a 0-0 draw against Kansas City. But Seattle as well has really picked up form, and at home, as we know, they're very elite, and it took them very late. They got a lot of chances, but they couldn't score until a very late penalty against Dallas. But regardless, both these teams climbing up the standings. San Diego dealing with some injuries here and there, of course, and playing, whether that be Valakari as a false 9 or, whoever in that striker position. The fluidity in that possession is really tough to handle for many teams, and we saw that against Seattle, who also kind of shot itself in the foot at the same time in that previous matchup. So this is going to be an interesting rematch. Seattle defensively sound as well, but still missing Reagan. So this one's another one that's hard to predict. There's, not much wear and tear between these two teams because neither has been playing an Open Cup. And, this is not really true travel. It's, a couple hours away, right, on the West Coast. A lot of these West Coast teams, when they match up and they have to, quote, travel, it's not really a big deal unless you're playing in, like, Colorado or RSL because that's altitude. But, yeah, I mean, this is a good rematch. I don't really have a full lean on this one because Seattle is hard to beat at home, but San Diego can really take it to you in its possession. But at the same time, Seattle also loves to have possession, so it's going to be interesting tactically how this one sets up and changes who kind of takes control of the game, because Seattle being at home is going to want to kind of contribute to that. But San Diego, they've just been finding goals from everyone, right? For Seattle, it's been a lot of, honestly, Musovski and Ruznak recently. Ferreira hasn't really been, putting a stamp on this team so far, halfway through the season. So we'll see what kind of rotation there might be. I think Seattle might have a little bit more of it just because they have just depth actually to work with compared to San Diego, who's been, of course, having to just run guys into the ground, so to speak. But I think this one ends. I think San Diego gets it done once again. I'm going to go for a 2-1 San Diego win, a rare upset in Seattle. Moving on with another West Coast game. It's the Galaxy hosting the Quakes. And this one has certainly delivered in just generally in recent history for sure as well. And the Galaxy still searching for their first win. Thought they could get it in El Tráfico, came out with the draw, and then At San Diego, another late goal to concede and not even pick up a point. Meanwhile, San Jose has been, I think it's now 8 or 9 unbeaten in MLS play or in all comps, including Open Cup, because they advanced now to the quarterfinals. Coming back from 2-0 down at home against Houston, that's, no easy feat in general. And then also did go up 3-2, but then gave up a late equalizer. And this one sets up to be a banger, even though it's a midweek short rest. Both these teams staying on, in their home state, technically, after the weekend's games. And once again, not too many travel concerns. Galaxy, technically the fresher team because they haven't been dealing with those extra games in Open Cup like San Jose has. And I think this just sets up really well for the Galaxy to finally find that first win of the season. But I don't really want to back them, right? Because, probability-wise, it hasn't happened yet. We're hitting the halfway point of the season almost. And, the odds for their money line are around, plus 100. But here for our fourth best bet, I'm going to take, I think this is the third best bet. I have it listed as number 4. But we're going to take the Galaxy on the team total over 1.5 at minus 140. And this is to win 1 unit. So usually, obviously, all my bets are just I bet a unit and we win whatever the price is back. But this one is a little juicier, a little, at my limit. So I want to make it to win 1 unit, just to note that there. But I think if the Galaxy have any chance of winning this game, they're going to need to score a couple as well. So I'm kind of aligned with them winning, but I also don't want to rely on this defense because these two teams are the 2 worst teams in terms of expected goals allowed and the chances they give up. And the Quakes, of course, just run that style of play, very back and forth. Attacking-wise, they're first as well in XG. But they're going to be missing Arango here, and then Martinez has been kind of playing minutes here, minutes there, and then finally started last game. So on a short week of rest, is he going to get a lot of run? We'll see. But regardless, without Arango as well in that 2-striker setup, this team just gets a little bit weaker. And I know Preston Judd scored 2 last match week, but let's be serious. No one's really scared of him. And the Galaxy as well. Painsel's back again from injury. Peck's here. I think this is the one. This one or upcoming against RSL, they're gonna get their first win. I don't think that's crazy to say. These are 2 very vulnerable teams from a defensive side of things that the Galaxy are about to match up against. And here I'm gonna take them just to score 2 because I obviously don't want to trust this defense. I don't think they've held a clean sheet all season, right? Because even in their draws, I don't think they've had a 0-0 draw. So I think this is a great way to play the Galaxy if you like them. And I think this price is only going to get higher because this game should be a shootout in general. Obviously, I'm not saying the Quakes, couldn't win here. But I think the Galaxy are going to be on the front foot for the most part and take control of this game. And the over in general should probably hit. And I did trust Portland against the Quakes once earlier this season instead of just taking the total when that was a better play. But I think here, the home team being the Galaxy, I think this all sets up for them to put on a show, at least from an attacking perspective, because it's hard to see them winning this one 1-0. I think 2 will be needed, and so that's where I'm going with for the third best bet. One of the final few games of the slate, it's another Western Conference matchup, and it's 6th versus 7th in the West. Timbers hosting the Rapids, and for this one, the final best bet of the show, the 4th one, I'm going with the Rapids on the plus 0.75. So it's Rapids plus a half / plus 1. It's split. So the plus a half is the same as double chance. And then the plus 1 means if they lose by 1, you push. If they lose by 2, then this would be a full loss. In the case that they lose by 1, it's going to be a half loss and then half of the money back. If they, at least draw, it's going to be a full win. So we get a little bit of protection in terms of how much we would lose if they were to just lose by 1 on the road here. But the Timbers, once again, faded them last week from an attacking perspective in taking the under in that game against Orlando because they were traveling all the way to the East Coast after an Open Cup game against San Jose. And here I'm going to fade them again. They have to come all the way back right on this short rest. And though they are the home team, Colorado is going to be much fresher. And also staying on that West Coast in a sense. And these two teams have already matched up, and I took the Rapids in the reverse matchup as well. But I think the underlying numbers there were far in favor of the Rapids, and the Rapids got unlucky on a really bad own goal, and then the Timbers were allowed to just counter, which is really what's important to them, right, in terms of these results. When the Timbers get a lead, right, then that's when they're at their best, because they are one of the most elite teams in terms of killing games off on the counter. And Colorado as well doesn't really get the ball a lot either. But I think, once again, the Timbers are going to be the more tired team. They've been falling off a cliff in terms of their attacking output, and this run of games is really taking its toll. Meanwhile, the Rapids haven't been dealing with Open Cup or anything along those lines. They've picked up back-to-back wins with clean sheets against RSL and St. Louis at home. It's not a far travel here, of course, compared to what the Timbers have been dealing with coming back from the East Coast, and it's just not favorable right now, right? And although the Rapids might be missing Zach Steffen, the backup, as I mentioned, he's played those past two games where they've gotten those shutouts or clean sheets. And, you could say it's against some pretty teams in RSL and St. Louis. But St. Louis has some good chances in that one, including a really a one-on-one breakaway that should have been scored, but the goalkeeper really stepped up in that situation. And then eventually the Rapids, that was when it was still 0-0. So he's been stepping up, and Navarro was expected to be training ahead of this game, so he could be coming back. But Yappy has been good enough. And even though Bassett's injured, Cudi Pietro, who I've been really high about, and the player they traded for from DC, he was dealing with a shoulder injury, I believe it was, to start the first few months of the season, but has been ramping up his minutes and has actually started now recently. So he adds that creative spark even with Bassett out, and I think he brings this team to a bit of another level. But this could be one once again between these two sides. I was also looking at maybe taking the under in this one because it's sitting at under 3. Over under 3 flat, and I think that's once again a pretty good line, honestly. But I think the Rapids will have just enough to not get out of this with a loss. I have been wrong about them a lot this season. I think they have been inconsistent, but at the same time, the Timbers have really been coming back down to earth because the quality of their they've gone through a lot on individual brilliance, which will take you far in MLS. But with everything they're dealing with compared to the Rapids, I think the Rapids are going to be much more fresh. And yeah, I just don't think they're going to get blown out here in this sense or even lose. So with this line as well, I think at worst, if the Rapids were to lose, it won't be a blowout. And I like the prospects. I like the potential of the lineup. I don't see too much rotation. I think with the Timbers, you might see some because of, they do have a little bit of depth, but at the same time, Jonathan Rodriguez hasn't been allowed to be given starts yet due to still dealing with match fitness. So once again, I like this line, and I'm going to double down on the Rapids in this matchup to get a little bit of revenge. To close out this midweek slate, it's the Whitecaps and Minnesota, first versus third in the West, and we saw this matchup just 5 match weeks ago or so when Vancouver was dealing with Champions Cup and went on the road and just beat the brakes off Minnesota with a dominant second half performance on the road and really put their stamp on that first seed in the Western Conference at the moment, which they're still retaining. But they are obviously looking ahead to this unbelievably important weekend for this club's history in the Champions Cup final on Sunday against Cruz Azul, where they'll have to travel to Mexico. And so I'm sure there will be a 50-50-ish lineup here in terms of, how much run you want to give guys, especially since both also played in the Canadian Championship the previous midweek, and then also were in action, this past weekend. And so it's hard to really expect Vancouver to be on top of it. They have been a lot, as they've been making this run and just been putting in performance after performance in terms of the quality despite the tired legs. But this to me just has to be treated differently. This is a final we're talking about. This is just unprecedented territory for the Whitecaps. And so this is one that I want no part in terms of a betting perspective. As for actual just a prediction in general, Minnesota, they've had success recently at home. They've advanced in Open Cup, But when they've rotated, it's really hurt them. It hurt them against Houston, and when they've went up against Austin early, and been in these kind of situations against teams that don't really force the issue in possession, that then they can't really counter, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Minnesota has every chance to get this revenge and get the upset on the road, but it's also still a far travel, on a bit of short rest. So I think honestly the under could be a good play in this one, but I also want to wait for lineups and see how much Minnesota is investing into this game, because then on the weekend they have to continue this road trip and play in Seattle. So I think out of either situation, this could be the one Minnesota takes advantage of the most. But the Whitecaps, I don't think they're going to, use too much energy. They're probably going to get guys like 20 minutes of run just to stay fresh a little bit down the stretch. But, will that lead to a result? Will that lead to sustained effort throughout this 90 minutes of the match? I'm not going to bank on that. I'm going to say this one ends 1-1. Thanks for tuning in once again, everyone, for the midweek preview. Once again, it's a short turnaround and a lot of games coming at you fast. So if you've been keeping up with the league, hope you've been enjoying it. I think it's winding down towards this final stretch here before, once again, some other competitions coming up, and the league will have a bit of a break and a lot more of a choppier schedule. I think even after the next week and a half, it's going to be only 5 or 6 games on the next weekend or something like that. And then, but the big thing obviously upcoming is week 17 as well, with the 2 headliners being not even MLS games, is obviously the Champions Cup final and that Club World Cup playing game that LAFC season. That's going to be taking away, of course, all the attention from the week 17 slate. But let me know what your favorite games are ahead for this midweek slate, and drop other comments below what your predictions are. Make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And I'll see you all when I see you ahead of the next video. We'll be previewing week 17 slate this coming weekend. Have a good one, guys.